All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the New England University Transportation Center webinar series. We're pleased today to run this webinar series in conjunction with the Innovation webinar, the UMTC Innovation webinar. So bringing both of these groups together to learn about some of the great work being done by NEUTC and our colleagues from UConn, which I'll introduce in just a second. Just before we get this kicked off, I just wanted to give a quick background of who NEUTC is. So the New England University Transportation Center, we are a Region 1 UTC up here in New England. UMass is the lead university, and our mission is to advance transportation safety through transformational research, education, and tech transfer. We're made up of a handful of universities and colleges around New England. So here in Massachusetts, we have MIT, Holyoke Community College, Bunker Hill Community College, University of New Hampshire up in New Hampshire, and Norwich University located in Vermont. And last but very not least are our folks down at UConn who are presenting in this webinar series today. So really excited to have Rosanna Getty and Sergeant Charles Grasso here presenting on their work that recently wrapped up at the tail end of last year, unlocking forensics data for vehicles involved in motor vehicle crashes. So just a little bit of housekeeping really quick before I hand the floor over to them. We'll have them give their presentation. At any point, if you want to pop a question into the Q&A function, feel free to do so. We'll take those all at the end. So Chuck, Rosanna, I'll hand the floor over to you and take it away.
Thank you. My name's Chuck Grasso. I work here at UConn now. I've been here about 14 years. Prior to that, I spent 30 years in law enforcement. The majority of my career as a crash investigator and a commander of a traffic division. I've been a reconstructionist the last 26 years, and I've investigated many crashes. And my job here at UConn now is I work with all of Connecticut's law enforcement on crash data and crash analysis, with a very large portion of that being the Connecticut fatalities.
My name is Rosanna Getty, and I'm a research assistant on the crash data team here at the Connecticut Transportation Safety Research Center at UConn. I work with Chuck and the other liaisons with crash data. And this is our presentation on unlocking forensics data for vehicles involved in motor vehicle crashes. The motivation for this project. Despite significant advancements in automotive safety technology in recent years, we still see nearly 1.2 million fatalities worldwide annually due to motor vehicle crashes, and as well as many millions of injuries with varying degrees of severity. Traditional crash reports can often lack pre-crash detail, and while different sources of crash data like police reports and hospital records can give us some insight into post-crash outcomes, they often leave us with questions about causation or what exactly happened leading up to the crash. Fortunately, most new vehicles manufactured in 2012 and forward are equipped with an event data recorder, an EDR, which is housed in the airbag control module of the vehicle. For example, in Hondas and Toyotas, you'll find it under the middle console armrest area. BMWs and Mercedes, you can find it either under the driver's seat or the driver's side floorboard. Pretty accessible places. And in other makes and models, you can find it in other places in the vehicle as well. This technology offers us a glimpse into vehicle and driver behavior in the critical moments immediately prior to a crash. The EDR can capture a lot of valuable information about speed, braking, was the vehicle accelerating or decelerating, steering, were the lights being used, were the seatbelts being used. And all of this information is objective and time-stamped, which helps the investigator reconstruct the crash more completely. It can identify contributing factors with greater confidence and support the fairest legal outcomes pertaining to the crash. So an example of what the EDR might tell you is, say, for example, there was a crash where a motor vehicle hit a pedestrian, and the driver of that car said, I saw them and I hit the brakes right before I hit the pedestrian. The EDR can either confirm for us, yes, they did hit the brakes. It could tell us, no, they did not hit the brakes. Or it might tell us that, yes, they compressed the brake pedal, but the vehicle did not mechanically engage the way that it should have. This study compares traditional crash reconstruction with EDR supported reconstruction, outlining how the EDR can deny, confirm, or clarify details collected from witnesses, from involved parties, and from physical evidence from the scene, and provide additional data about specific vehicle dynamics in the sequence of events leading up to a crash. Okay. The study design. Our objective was to compare reconstructions using physical evidence only versus physical evidence and EDR data. We looked at 5 fatal crashes and analyzed them. The data sources were police reports, scene evidence, and vehicle EDRs. And this was a paired case analysis where each case was reconstructed twice.
In looking at these cases, what we did is, again, we worked with the traditional values. One of the big things that pop out right away is that in a traditional reconstruction, you're looking for roadway evidence. The roadway evidence in the case of speed would be deceleration or skid marks. The formula used for that gives you the minimum speed of the car or the vehicle at the start of the skid to the end of the skid. With the anti-lock brakes, that almost becomes you can't do it because the evidence, something called shadowing, disappears long before the investigative stage. So the EDR, like in this case that we did, this was a single vehicle fatality, and 5 seconds prior to the impact, the EDR showed us that the vehicle was traveling at 97 miles an hour. It goes down from 5 seconds to a point of within 500 milliseconds of at impact, or within 500 milliseconds. It was 82 miles an hour in this crash, and there was no braking involved. There was no steering input involved. It shows me that the driver was unbelted, but the passenger in the car was belted. It brings data forward that would be difficult to use from a law enforcement standpoint and working with the courts and prosecution. But it also points out a lot of things that just could not have been done. Very precise information. Now, this car, in this case, I randomly picked the 5 fatals. So this isn't one of the more advanced. Some of the more advanced cars now, and I'll use, we've done 2 Teslas in the past year. That has 13 the vehicles we did had 13 cameras in them as well. And as well as the data that was locked into the EDR. So now we're getting to the point where we can look at a camera of the driver. You can look at the cameras on the outside of the vehicles. So the data is unbelievably important to the investigators. And what we've noticed with the Connecticut courts, typically when the investigator uses a download or includes a download, that it's not even challenged in court, because the defense would get the same thing if they did it. So it's really not challenged very much, and most of those cases are brought to conclusion very quickly. And case number 2 is another single vehicle. Again, it shows a driver and a passenger unbelted. This one was a little bit different. Speed, traditionally in the police report, they believe speed was a factor. In this case, there was a impairment. The operator was intoxicated. 5 seconds out, they were doing 58 miles an hour to an impact speed of 46 miles an hour. And these kind of numbers show something, a change in velocity or delta V. And it gives an indication for the studies that are out there that show what delta V is and what it would what's incompatible with human life. So these numbers are very important. But in this case, the driver was unbelted and the passenger was belted. And this next one is a 2-vehicle head-on crash. Speed was suspected, but there was a real lack of physical evidence that would help. In this case, the speed was 78 miles per hour consistently for the 5 seconds prior in that impact. There was no evasive action and no braking. The driver was belted, and again, unfortunately under the influence. This was a very high energy collision. The delta V was extremely high, and it was not compatible with life. The ability to look at these things, again, I can't stress it enough. I started as an investigator doing it with tape measures and a tire half filled with cement dragging down the street to do coefficient of frictions. Now, it's just invaluable in this case. Without, like I said, we're doing paraphrasing here with this. This crash would be about 100-page investigation. Crash number 4, speed not clearly a factor. There was a roadway defect noted. It was a two vehicles. Unfortunately, one wasn't a supported vehicle, so we have to do traditional momentum formulas and things of that nature. But the one vehicle that did have the EDR, it was a 35 mile an hour with no evasive action. And in this case, it showed that out of nowhere, the opposing vehicle just swerved into their lane and met them head on. There was no time to react with the normal perception and reaction time. Case number 5 is a pedestrian. Now, pedestrians are very unique. The newer vehicles, the pedestrians, the EDR will go off. In the older vehicles, the 2012s, 13s, that area, EDR only captures data when an event occurs. The event would be airbag deployment. It triggers the EDR to capture the data because it's continually moving. So in this case, it was an increase in speed before impact. The driver did make maneuvers, and it did show that there was an attempt to at least steer out of it, but there was no braking. And again, this all leads to how and why this happened. So those are the 5 cases that we looked at, and they were done originally by the investigating officers all over Connecticut. These crashes come from the southern part of Connecticut down near the New York border all the way up to Enfield in the north. So it was a wide variety. Unlike other states, Connecticut, the crash reconstructions are done by either regional teams or the municipal police departments. I know in the state of Massachusetts, all the reconstructions are done by the troopers, but in Connecticut, it's regional teams and individual agencies. So they call us here at UConn, and we go out and we'll assist them with a download. We'll assist them with the language for search warrants and things of that nature.
All right. So the impacts of the EDR data. As we've seen, this data can enhance the accuracy of reconstructions by denying, confirming, or clarifying different pieces of evidence collected during a traditional reconstruction, really turning a lot of those "we think this is what happened" statements into "we know this is what happened" statements. This evidence provides time-stamped objective evidence that gives us a clear and definite timeline of events leading up to the crash, helping us better understand what might have prevented it. This data can inform policy by providing evidence that supports legislative changes in the modernization of driving statutes. It can inform vehicle design by identifying where there might be flaws in a current design or where something might be made safer, or by helping to recognize a pattern of malfunction that leads to a recall. It can contribute to improving infrastructure, telling us where the roadway system itself might benefit from a countermeasure being put in place. Where might we use a road diet to slow down traffic or add rumble strips for a location where people are often going over the center line? Where could we improve lighting or drainage or use upgraded paving materials? Things like that. This data can also reveal risky driving behavior that can help to highlight topics that should be emphasized to new drivers when they're getting their training before they ever hit the roads. It can identify retraining needs for repeat offenders, as well as support implementing more serious consequences for repeatedly risky drivers. And this EDR data can support the fairest legal outcomes pertaining to the crash by providing the evidence needed to hold the correct party responsible and to help determine if there was any degree of negligence. So in conclusion, we see that the EDR data significantly improves crash reconstruction detail. It confirmed or clarified findings in all 5 of these cases. This data supports vehicle safety design, driver training, infrastructure, and policy. It hits those 4 E's of education, enforcement, environment, and engineering. And it can help recommendations include EDR data in serious. We recommend that we include EDR data in serious crash investigations because, again, it really helps to confirm findings. The physical evidence is absolutely necessary, but this is a great supplementary tool to confirm things. And that is all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So we'll open it to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chuck and Rosanna. We have a couple of questions already populated in the Q&A, but this is a quick reminder to everyone. If you had any questions regarding this robust EDR data and how they've used it in their analysis or anything outside of that that you are intrigued to ask them about, feel free to pop those into the Q&A feature. So the first one I have here is, does the EDR record an event only if the airbag is deployed or using other triggers like G-forces? More so wondering, for example, lower speed collisions where airbags don't deploy.
The newer vehicles, as things progressed, like I said, the 2012, 2013 era, it was airbag deployment only. The newer vehicles that are coming out are definitely they're looking. An event doesn't need a trigger; it just means an abrupt braking or a sudden stop, and it records the data. And again, like I said, the new vehicles, an old vehicle in 2012, 2013 would produce about 5 pages of data. New vehicles today are producing 60 pages of data for the investigators.
And then a little bit on that front, is the EDR data including whether any ADAS functions were any ADAS functions were enacted at the time of the crash? Were there any, lane assist, any of those things that were taken into consideration at the time of the crash?
Oh, excellent point. The newer vehicles, they are. Again, it's relatively, the later models here have a lot more ability to do that. As an example, I downloaded a Maserati, and that was like almost 70 pages of data, and it did everything. So it is something that's going forward. The Teslas, when we did those, it does tell us the mode that the vehicle's in and the safety features and everything you would need to know about, like I said, the lane, or was it in autonomous mode? Was it a level 2, 3, that kind of thing?
Gotcha. Okay. The next one we have here is, how does the data in the EDR output relate to the data included in basic safety message broadcasts from connected vehicle radio? And can that data also be used in the investigation?
Yes, it can. It's a different thing than the EDR, but it can be used. There are several ways that we're looking at in Connecticut now to use all that data, but it can definitely be used in the investigation, and it definitely is the next step. But so that's something that is definitely being pursued in Connecticut. There's only 2 agencies that do it. We're one of them that we are actually trying to get that more in depth with law enforcement.
And then that kind of tails into this question. So who you kind of just mentioned it, who's able to access this EDR data? Is it just police departments, specialists, researchers like yourself? Who's able to access this currently?
The current data, you need to be certified as a technician, then an analyst. It's a law enforcement function for the most part, but based on here, the police department would apply for a search warrant because it is the data of the operator. And once a search warrant's approved by a judge, then the agencies, if they don't have trained technicians, and the kits are somewhat expensive. I mean, the municipalities in Connecticut, most of these agencies can't afford to spend $40,000, $50,000 on the equipment. So we do that as a thing, and then we'll go out and we're willing. Myself and my other partner are both retired law enforcement, and we still keep our certifications going. so we can go out and we can testify and things, but it is available. It you don't necessarily, that's in a criminal matter with a case, an investigation, but if a person wants to do it, anybody can do it. It just, like I said, we have other steps we take for criminal matters. We all know that a lot of cars have the OBD port. The OBD port does the diagnostics at a mechanic for a mechanic, but this case, we have the plug that can go into the OBD port and it would do the same kind of download. In our criminal matters, we actually remove the ACM out of the car and take it as evidence.
Gotcha. That actually just answered another question that we had regarding the ports there. So trying to obtain, this is another question kind of related to the access is the EDR data currently a standard in Connecticut for technical crash investigations, or are we headed that way?
It's not necessary. It's not a requirement, but it is headed that way. We probably over the last 2 years have done probably close to 200 downloads. The state police also have some equipment to do it. The specialty team with the state police. So as the word's getting out, we're getting a lot of calls to assist, and that's part of our number one. We feel it's part of our job to assist law enforcement, but we get our hands on the data as well, so we can study it and do the research. And a lot of data, we do a lot of data sharing. In other words, we want to put everything together, data integration, so we can do the hospital data with the public health and so on and so forth. So it's a big piece.
Right, right, totally. There are a ton of questions, so I'm just going to keep rattling them
Oh
off.
boy.
This is good. This is great. So in how many cases were drivers distracted by external factors? I know this is a small set of case studies here that you had, but how many were distracted through things like phone use? And is that apparent?
That's not apparent with the EDR, but it's something called the Burla system that we can do as well. And that system is capable of telling me if somebody was on the phone. It gives me the GPS locations that the vehicle traveled. It will give you any kind of distractions. And of course, the ones with in-car cameras can actually, you can see. You can actually see that they're distracted, looking left, looking right. Nobody ever lies to the police in a crash, but because that means nobody's distracted. They'll never tell you that they were. But it does give us the capability going forward, especially with the newer vehicles. Going forward, we can use the other system to determine distraction and GPS locations. It does a plethora of data for us. We even used one in a homicide that helped out.
Yeah, the Burla specializes in infotainment and telematics data. So that's where you get a lot of that phone distraction kind of information. And that's still up and coming. As vehicles come out, they're figuring how to reverse engineer to use the Burla system with the new vehicles. They're still working everything out with that, but it's got a very interesting data.
And again, that would be a search warrant specifically designed for that.
Yeah, we actually have a question here regarding when your insurance asks you if you want to provide driver data, are they gaining access to EDR? But I think you were just talking about that, Rosanna. That's more of the Burla data, the telematics data.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Also, one of the things that note, most cars now, if you notice your GPS in the car, it tracks you. With some of the Fords, when you start the car, it'll give you a heads up that it's monitoring your vehicle. And Tesla gets downloads constantly while you're driving. It learns from like almost an AI. It learns from its behavior. All the major motor vehicles do that now. So, but they use the data internally, and they'll sell it to research universities. It'll be blind. It'll be no personal or private information, but they do sell the data and they do track them.
Gotcha. And then kind of flipping this a little bit, I know it was mentioned there at the end regarding the impacts on infrastructure. Is it possible to use this EDR data to observe, say, the performance of highway safety infrastructure?
Matter of fact, there is a case that we were involved with, not part of this study. It was in the city of Hartford. There was multiple fatals on this. Over a period of time, there were multiple fatals. The EDR data showed that it brought the attention to the fact that It was speed and non-lane compliance. So what the city did is they did a road diet with a positive median barrier, and there hasn't been a fatal since on that roadway. So yes, the data does go that far. Matter of fact, there was another one on Route 91 in Connecticut. They determined that the coefficient of friction that was used on the road was not high enough. So what happens is every time it rained, cars were spinning out. So they were able to determine that with the EDR data that that they needed to do that, and then they've of course redone the pavement, so it's a higher coefficient of friction.
Gotcha. So this is one here. So investigators who we have talked to, whoever this person is, has reported that the lack of standardization about the ADAS data on EDRs is a big challenge, whereas the data on the airbag modification is standardized, or mod. How or has this also been your experience in this case study or in this work?
No, it hasn't been in Connecticut. It hasn't been an issue at all. So we've been fairly lucky. We haven't run into that. So, and again, the airbag modules, that's the predominant one, and we've had no issues whatsoever. And but I'm sure somebody's going to challenge us eventually.
And then another one here, quick one. Does anyone know of any states that build implied consent for EDR data retrieval into the vehicle registration issuance transactions? The way implied consent to things like alcohol testing is built into driver license.
No, I don't know of any state that is, and all the counterparts that I've spoken with, both law enforcement and research nationwide, including people I work with from NHTSA, it's been you have to do a search warrant. There's no implied whatsoever with that.
Okay. And then can EDR data be acquired remotely, or do you need physical access to the vehicle? Obviously, with a concern of remote hacking, modification of important information remotely, et cetera. Just your 2 cents on that.
Yep, vehicles that we do, we have to physically have the vehicle, and if there's no power to the module, what we do is we take the module out of the car and take it as evidence. Tesla, the data goes to them automatically, constantly. Within 4 seconds of a crash of a Tesla, they have all the videos and everything. However, it's scrambled, and once you get a search warrant, we serve it on Tesla, and they're very good working with law enforcement. They descramble it and send it to us. So other than certain location data in the other vehicles, like the Fords I know, it's not really hackable.
Okay. And then,
But then again, you don't know.
right, right. And then kind of really, really tied to that in some ways is can the EDR also be damaged in some of the most severe crashes? And is there a way that information cannot be pulled? Do those instances happen?
They do happen, but very rare. I've seen ones where they've been submerged in water, like where a vehicle went into the river or the ocean. The box can be retrieved, and there is a group that's involved with this in upper state New York, and they'll do it free for law enforcement. They re-chip the box. They can take the chip out. I've even seen it when an EDR's been or the ACM's been melted. They were able to pull the chip, put it in a different box, and it saved the data. So very rarely does it get destroyed, but it can be like anything else.
Right. And then I got one more here, and perhaps this will put a bow on this presentation. So you touched a little bit about this in the presentation, but from a roadway safety point of view, how does EDR add value that's not already going to be recorded in a crash report? And I think you touched on that, but maybe just emphasize that a little bit more. What does this EDR data really add to the complexity of a crash story?
What it does is it gives you factual data, and I'll use speed as the example. If I know somebody was doing with the speed formulas, and there's one or two that are exact, but you need very precise evidence to do that. Most of them are bracketed speeds, so you get a minimum speed. So I know somebody was doing 50, minimum of 54, let's say, based on deceleration. However, with the EDR, I can actually say how fast the roadway, what they were traveling. So it does give you more precise data. And one thing that I say to law enforcement when they do these is the EDR data has to be complementary, not contradictory. If you have a if it's contradictory, something's wrong with your investigation as well, and we have to relook at that.
And things happen so quickly with the crashes that, people would say, I think I turned the wheel left and then this happened, but that may not be the case. And they may not be trying to lie, but it just happened. It's a very flustering situation. And then there's also the drivers that are trying to mislead, the investigating officer because they know that they did something wrong. So the supplementary EDR data can say, this is factual. You turned your wheel left. You did not hit your brakes, things like that.
Awesome. Well, any last comments or thoughts, Rosanna, Chuck, that we didn't touch on these questions by any chance?
I think I'm all set. Thank you so much for listening.
The questions were awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to present this, and I feel very strongly that it's going to save lives in the long run.
Well, we very much appreciate you talking about this project today. It's great work coming out of University of Connecticut. For those folks out there in the audience, so this webinar it's been recorded and will be posted onto our NEUTC website. That's umass.edu/NEUTC, directly to the project page. So you can go through the different projects that we have at NEUTC. So this specific project will host a link to the YouTube page where this video will be posted. So Rosanna, Chuck, thank you so much again for the presentation, and thank you all for tuning in for another NEUTC webinar.
Thank
Have a
you.
great afternoon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.